Good morning, respected Emeritus Chairperson, sir, VC sir, Pro VC sir, Principal sir, Malhotra sir, all the faculty and dear students. Today we will cover an interesting case from our department, that is 31-year-old lady and her journey from malignancy to motherhood. Before that, I would like to give a brief introduction of our department. Our department was established at MGH in 2012, and with continuous growth, advanced infrastructure and a committed team, the department became fully functional by 2016. Offering comprehensive fertility services and academic training, we got our MCH reproductive medicine seats in 2020. We have been allotted 2 seats out of 13 all over India. So our team includes our Emeritus Chairperson sir as our guide and mentor, our Chairperson cum Chancellor sir, Dr. Sangeeta is our professor, and Dr. Meenal and Dr. Sana are our assistant professors. So far we have 4 batches of MCH reproductive medicine, out of them 2 have passed out. Our department covers all the aspects of advanced ART management, including ICSI, surgical sperm retrieval, frozen embryo transfer, and our data is on rising trend since our inception, except for the COVID area. Our OPD and IPD facilities includes fertility enhancing lapro and hysteroscopic surgeries, genetic testing, counseling, fetal medicine, advanced ultrasound facilities, high risk pregnancy management, and advanced fertility management. Our IVF lab is well equipped with all advanced techniques including ICSI, blastocyst culture, laser assisted hatching, surgical sperm retrieval, cryopreservation of gametes, third party, that is donor facilities, and recently we get our ART bank license in June 2025 only. Our evolving facilities include the fertility preservation facilities in onco as well as non-onco indications, and pre-implantation genetic testing of the embryos for aneuploidies, monogenic disorders, or structural rearrangements to select the best embryo before transfer, and embryoscope for continuous monitoring of the embryo growth so that we can select the better. Other courses includes BSc, MSc and PhD in embryology, and 6-month certificate courses in clinical embryology, basic and the advanced ART. Our teaching pattern is based on integrated learning with the Department of Urology, Endocrinology, Gynae Endoscopy, Medical Genetics, Radiology and Psychology. Sir himself participate actively in the teaching and training of our students, and they have a well-equipped IVF lab for teaching. We also emphasize on the research projects in our department. Our residents are getting various awards in various categories of state and national conferences like poster and paper presentations. Dr. Parvati got first prize in national quiz in 2023, and Dr. Aparajita contributed a chapter in textbook of hysteroscopy along with faculty. Dr. Shrishti recently got first prize in poster presentation in Ferticon 2025, and Dr. Shuvi, our first year, got third prize in paper presentation in ESA 2025, our national conference. We got Best IVF Team in Rajasthan Award in 2024 on the day of Doctors' Day celebration. Also achieved ESAR Achievers and IFS Achiever Awards. Dr. Sangeeta Sharma got various prestigious awards in 2022 and 2024, and also contributed many chapters in many reputed ART books. We participated as faculty in various state and national conferences. The 2 important events in 2024 were, one was the organization of Onco-Fertility Conference in collaboration with the Department of Oncology, where we covered various aspects of onco-fertility or fertility preservation, like indications, options and challenges in fertility preservation. Second one was the Gynae Sonomela in collaboration with the Department of Gynae and Cages. Dr. Nahata sir was our leader, and it was a very successful event. As our university policy, we also focus on the publications, and various research articles have been published in various index journal by our faculty as well as by our residents, and many projects are ongoing. But one of our ambitious project is based on the stem cell therapy, and Dr. Nahata is doing hard to get this project, and it is based on the role of stem cells in thin endometrium and poor ovarian reserve. One of the complication of genital tuberculosis, which is an important cause of infertility still in India. So now I would like to call upon Dr. Shrishti for case presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, respected teachers, seniors, and my dear colleagues. Myself, Dr. Srishti Chaudhary, third year MCH resident, is presenting a case of Mrs. N, a 31-year-old female, government school teacher, married for 3 years to Mr. P, a 29-year-old central government employee, resident of Nagaur, Rajasthan. They presented to our OPD with chief complaints of inability to conceive for last 3 years. The couple have been having regular unprotected intercourse 2 to 3 times per week since marriage. They are aware of fertile period, no contraception ever used, no history of prior conception or miscarriage, no symptoms which are suggestive of ovulatory dysfunction, as their cycles have been regular with normal flow. During routine fertility workup at Jodhpur 4 months back, a left adnexal complex mass was identified on transvaginal scan that raised the suspicion of malignancy. Other routine fertility investigations, including TSH, prolactin, hysterosalpingography, and semen analysis, were within normal limits. Transvaginal scan report shows normal uterus, a simple cyst in right adnexa, and a complex mass measuring 5.6 into 3.5 centimeter in left adnexa with increased vascularity along with free fluid in POD. Tumor markers were done, out of which CA125 was almost 10 times raised. Beta-HCG, LDH, and AFP were within normal limits. Now, what could be the causes of this adnexal mass with raised CA125 levels? Anyone from audience? So CA125 is a non-specific tumor marker which gets raised whenever there is peritoneal irritation. So it could be any benign, malignant or borderline ovarian tumor and some non-ovarian malignancy. With such high level of CA125, the benign conditions are less likely. MRI pelvis was done which suggested a likely benign left ovarian mass, possibly thecoma. What should be the next plan at this stage?
In GI practice, sometimes we see very high tumor marker levels even in chronic conditions. For example, chronic pancreatitis can have hundreds and thousands of levels of CA99. So is that possible in gynae also, that you could have a very high level of CA125?
So we generally experience such high level whenever there is some malignant condition. With benign conditions like endometrioma or tuberculosis, it rises but it generally remains below 100. What should be the next plan at this stage? So laparoscopy was performed at outside center with the intent to resect the mass and to evaluate infertility. Intraoperatively, they found that both ovaries were enlarged with deposits on its surface. Similar deposits were also seen over peritoneum, omentum, bowel and POD. Biopsies were taken from both ovaries and peritoneum. Further procedure was abandoned as there was high suspicion of malignancy. Biopsy from both ovaries and peritoneal implant revealed high-grade serous adenocarcinoma. IHC marker were positive for estrogen receptor in 60% of cells. So this was advanced ovarian serous adenocarcinoma involving both ovaries and peritoneum. Menstrual history.
But why do you say stage not defined? Because peritoneal biopsy also is positive, so doesn't it become metastatic?
Sir, it was having peritoneal metastasis, but at this stage there was the distance metastasis was not discovered.
No, no. So if peritoneal implant is positive, doesn't it become M1? In ovary, no? So what is the stage when peritoneum is positive?
Sir, stage 3.
Because if laparoscopy and biopsy has been done, stage should be defined.
So ovarian malignancy is usually spread by contiguity, and if you have a contiguous spread, like say a buccal mucosa going to cervical lymph nodes, it is something like that. It becomes stage 3. Now this was all done outside, and at this stage we can say that it is stage 3, but whether it is stage 4 or not, we cannot say.
This is not contiguous. You are saying there are implants in the peritoneum. It is not that adjacent peritoneum is involved.
Sir, because the ovarian malignancy, sir, ovarian malignancy generally spread through the peritoneal fluid, and that's why it get implanted in peritoneal.
No, categorically no, sir. This is stage 3, provided there are no distant metastases proven by other investigations. Distant metastasis meaning lung disease, liver parenchymal disease, and disease elsewhere. So we'll show you the FIGO staging in the subsequent slides.
Menstrual history was not significant. She came to us on day 24 of her cycle. Past medical history and personal history was also not significant. The patient had a strong family history of ovarian cancer in her mother and maternal aunt. Mother had stage 3 ovarian disease. Both were diagnosed in their 40s. Both underwent surgery and chemotherapy and are currently healthy and disease-free. What genetic predisposition should be suspected in this case? Anyone?
So gynae residents, medicine residents, what will you think of in a patient like this? Relatively young, high-grade serous carcinoma and strong family history. What are the most common genes doing this? Anybody? Come on. Very good. So those are the common genes, a whole bunch of other genes also, but the most common, most established, most publicized ones are the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 genes.
So these are certain genetic conditions which are associated with ovarian carcinoma, including BRCA1 and 2 mutation. Others are Lynch syndrome, Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, Cowden syndrome, etc. Partner history was also not significant. Semen analysis was already performed outside and it was normal. General physical examination was normal. BMI was 18.1 kg per meter square. Systemic examination including central nervous system, cardiovascular, respiratory, musculoskeletal were within normal limits. Abdominal examination showed no ascites clinically appreciable. Gynae examination was conducted. On inspection and per speculum examination, there was no gross pathology. Per vaginal examination revealed a left fornical fixed mass measuring around 5 cm. Right fornix was free and no nodularity felt in either fornices or POD. We performed our transvaginal scan. So right adnexa showed a cystic mass. Along with that, there were 8 to 10 follicles which was seen in healthy tissue. In left adnexa, there was a complex mass apart from 3 to 4 dispersed follicle and free fluid in POD. Anti-Mullerian hormone, which is a marker of ovarian reserve, was advised. So we have a 31-year-old infertile woman with histologically confirmed bilateral ovarian serous adenocarcinoma with peritoneal disease with a strong family history for ovarian malignancy, and she is desirous for fertility preservation. Here are certain challenges in this case. The challenges are to obtain optimal oncology outcome, to preserve fertility, to consider moral, ethical and legal issues. We started with initial counseling. Management plan and prognosis was to be discussed with oncology team. Risk of infertility due to gonadotoxic chemotherapy and surgery was explained. There was possibility of low oocyte yield and poor quality due to bilateral ovary involvement. Risk of suboptimal ovarian response. Available fertility preservation options were discussed. Despite detailed counseling, the patient remained strongly motivated for fertility preservation using her own gametes. Then she was referred to Department of Medical Oncology for planning of further management. And to discuss same, I would like to call Dr. Kanupriya from Department of Medical Oncology.
Good morning, all present. I am Dr. Kanupriya, the second year DM resident from Department of...
I'm not ready to give you to the surgical oncology. You're not an MCH resident. Are you an MCH resident? She is my best resident. I will not surrender you to MCH.
Sorry, sir, by mistake. Um, so I'm a second year DM resident from the Department of Medical Oncology. So as we now know that till now we have to summarize this case. We have 31-year-old lady who is married, has no children. During the evaluation for primary infertility, she was diagnosed with high-grade serous adenocarcinoma, bilateral ovaries with peritoneal metastasis. Also, she has a strong family history of ovarian cancer. Now, as a staging workup, here we have advised the patient to get a whole body PET-CT done. Also, in view of the strong family history that she has, genetic testing was advised, which includes BRCA1 and BRCA2 testing. I would now like to call upon stage Dr. Kaushiki from Department of Nuclear Medicine to take the case further.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, professors, and my dear colleagues. I, Kaushiki Shukla, from Department of Nuclear Medicine, am here to discuss the PET-CT findings of this patient. This is the 18F FDG maximum intensity projection image that shows normal physiological uptake in brain, myocardium, and urinary bladder, along with increased focal uptake in bilateral adnexa. These representative images show FDG-AVID solid cystic mass lesion in bilateral ovaries in axial and coronal sections. These images show FDG-AVID multiple peritoneal deposits in variable locations. These images show FDG-AVID soft tissue density deposit at the supraumbilical port site. So the final impression is FDG-AVID adnexal mass with multiple peritoneal deposits, abdominal and pelvic lymph nodes, suggestive of metabolically active metastatic disease. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Kanupriya to take the case further.
So the final impression for this patient is that she is a case of CA bilateral ovary, high-grade serous adenocarcinoma with peritoneal metastasis, FIGO staging 3B, and BRCA1 was positive. So this case was then discussed in a multi-speciality tumor board, and the patient was planned for neoadjuvant chemotherapy with drugs injection paclitaxel and carboplatin. The patient, since she was strongly desirous for pregnancy despite being explained about the effects of chemotherapy on the fertility and also the risk of delaying chemotherapy for a period of 2 weeks during the procedure for fertility preservation. So over here I would like to make a special note on the impact of chemotherapy on fertility. Now various chemotherapy regimes, they have different effects on infertility. But in this case we were concerned about platinum based compounds, cisplatin, carboplatin, so which have intermediate risk of infertility, which means 30 to 70% of the patients receiving this regime may render infertile. But despite the patient being strongly desirous of fertility, the patient was referred to the Department of Reproductive Medicine for fertility preservation. I would like now to call Dr. Shrishti to take the case further.
This slide is showing how the basic process of IVF is done. So we first perform baseline evaluation that include hormones and AFC. The dose of gonadotropin and type is then decided. Controlled ovarian stimulation with injectable gonadotropins is continued for 10 to 12 days. When we get desired number and size of oocyte, then we give ovulation trigger with either HCG or GnRH agonist that is used for final oocyte maturation. Then we perform transvaginal oocyte retrieval, which is done 36 hours after trigger. The oocytes which are received and are then fertilized using sperm with either conventional technique or intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Then these zygotes are cultured up to day 3 or day 5, which can either be transferred back to the patient uterus or can be freezed. There are certain key concerns which were there in this patient during controlled ovarian stimulation. Since the tumor was ER positive, there was risk of estrogen surge that can stimulate tumor growth. Letrozole, which is an aromatase inhibitor, was added to suppress estrogen level. To avoid delay in starting chemotherapy, modified antagonist protocol, which is flexible and has shorter stimulation duration, was used. Pre-counseling was done to set realistic expectation. Bilateral ovarian involvement is likely to affect oocyte quality and number. Ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome risk was to be avoided. Despite having normal AMH, careful monitoring was required. The patient was confirmed to be BRCA1 positive. Further genetic counseling was provided regarding implication for offspring. PGTM, which is pre-implantation genetic testing for monogenic disorders, was discussed in details, including its benefit, that is selection of healthy embryos, its limitation, that is need of at least 3 to 4 high-grade embryos, and risk of embryo damage. Informed consent was obtained from the couple. Here is the fertility preservation consent form that we get signed from all our patients who are coming to us for fertility preservation, and it is in compliance with ART Act 2022. Baseline hormone profile was done. AMH was 2.54, AFC was 8 to 10 in right ovary and 3 to 4 in left ovary. Gonadotropin dose was decided based on our age, AMH, AFC and BMI. Modified letrozole-based antagonist protocol was selected for stimulation. Letrozole 5 mg along with recombinant FSH 150 international unit was given for 5 days, followed by HMG 225 international units for next 5 days along with letrozole. Injection cetrorelix, that is GnRH antagonist, was added day 6 onwards to prevent premature LH surge and oocyte release. Follicular study was done on day 6 and day 11. This is the image showing day 11. So uterus is having endometrial thickness of 8 mm. This is right ovary showing about 5 to 6 large follicle, and in left ovary we can see only 1 to 2 dispersed follicle. Ovulation trigger was given after this stimulation. Estrogen levels were done on the day of trigger. They came out to be 780 picogram per ml. This level was maintained to be less with effect of letrozole. Trigger was given with GnRH agonist, that is injection lupride 2 mg to induce final oocyte maturation. Then oocyte retrieval was planned 36 hours later. During oocyte retrieval, certain key concerns were there. There was risk of tumor dissemination, needle track seedling during needle puncture, risk of bleeding from friable and vascular ovarian surface, inadequate oocyte yield due to bilateral disease and difficult accessibility, technical difficulty due to altered ovarian anatomy or mass effect, infection risk from necrotic or hemorrhagic areas, risk of malignant cell aspiration into follicular fluid that may impact downstream embryo use if not separated properly.
So now after the fertility...
Sorry, I wanted to ask, maybe it is extension of the same question. What is recommended in such cases? You preserve the or freeze the ovum, or you do fertilization now and freeze the embryo? Why not preserve the ovum and do the fertilization later when pregnancy is to be carried?
So we give both choices to patient, and it depends on the choice of patient. In case she wants the embryo to be preserved, because embryo have good freezing and survival, but oocyte have a slightly less. But in case she is willing for oocyte, then we do oocyte practice.
No.
I will explain her in a more detail. You see, patient is married. She has come with the infertility complaint she wants, and embryo cryopreservation is the best, most studied. Conventional out of all freezing technology, sperm freezing and embryo freezing are the well-established techniques. So that has to be preferred. Second comes the oocyte. Suppose she was not married, then you should have frozen the oocytes. All right. Now you are freezing the oocytes, and then husband is there and you want later. What is the purpose solved?
There is risk of some marital disharmony
Yeah,
later on,
I was going to
then
ask
they
that.
prefer to go for
I was
oocyte
going
freezing
to
also.
ask that in view of her disease and expected survival. These are ethical issues, of course, but from medical point of view, as you said, that embryo is more stable to be frozen rather than the ovum.
We get better success rate.
So now after fertility preservation, the patient was started on neoadjuvant chemotherapy with paclitaxel and carboplatin given every 3 weekly. So no major toxicities were observed apart from grade 1 nausea and vomiting. So 6 cycles of chemotherapy were completed, and following which a PET-CT was done for the response assessment. So now these are the comparative images of the PET-CT. So this one was the initial PET-CT, which was discussed earlier, with FDG avidity in bilateral adnexa. This was PET-CT done after 3 cycles of chemotherapy, which was suggestive of a partial response. And this was done after 6 cycles were completed, which was suggestive of a significant response, with only remnant of FDG avidity present in bilateral adnexa, but no other FDG avidity anywhere else in the body. So following this, we referred the patient to oncosurgery for further management. I would now like to invite Dr. Gyanendra to take the case further.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Gyanendra, Senior Resident, Department of Surgical Oncology. To summarize the case first, 31-year-old nulli gravida female, diagnosed with high-grade serous adenocarcinoma, FIGO stage being 3B, BRCA positive, and post-fertility preservation and post 6 cycles of neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And on PET-CT scan, there was significantly good response. So, patient was planned for cytoreductive surgery in the month of July 2021. After routine investigations, PAC and consents, patient was taken up for surgery under general anesthesia with epidural block. And to begin with, peritoneal fluid cytology was collected by instilling and aspirating 50 ml of saline from pelvis, and then followed by thorough abdominal exploration. During exploration, it was found that disease was limited to bilateral ovaries only, and there was no evidence of any disease elsewhere in the peritoneal cavity, and uterus was also grossly normal. We proceeded further with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy with total omentectomy. And to complete the surgical staging, we did multiple peritoneal biopsies along with pelvic and para-aortic lymph node dissections. Uterus was preserved. We also excised the supraumbilical port. As we modified the surgery in this particular case, as patient was strongly desirous of pregnancy, so we preserved the uterus. Post-op period was uneventful, and patient being discharged on post-op day 6. Patient was again referred back to medical oncology department for further management. Now I'd like to call Dr. Kanupriya.
So after the surgery, the histopathology reporting was suggestive of serous carcinoma involving bilateral ovaries, low grade, tumor confined within the capsule, 0 out of 10 lymph nodes were free of tumor, the peritoneal biopsies and the ports inside skin was also free of tumor. So the final histopathology staging was YPT1B N0. So, in view of the BRCA1 positive status, this patient was started on adjuvant PARP inhibitor therapy, poly-ADP ribose polymerase therapy with olaparib drug 300 mg twice a day, and the patient completed 2 years course of this drug. Now, after completion of olaparib, she was reviewed after 1 year, and there was no evidence of disease in the imaging. PET-CT was within normal limits, and the CA-125 was also within the normal range. So now the patient was referred back to reproductive medicine for planning the pregnancy.
After completing her onco treatment, patient returned back to us after 3 years, and now she was 34-year-old. She has been amenorrheic for this whole duration. When we performed her transvaginal scan, the uterus was small with poor vascularity. We did her pre-conception blood profile including CA-125, and that was normal. Decision was made to initiate low-dose HRT for uterine priming. HRT protocol include tablet estradiol valerate 2 mg twice daily for 25 days and tablet medroxyprogesterone acetate 10 mg once daily given for last 10 days of each cycle. After 3 cycles, patient had a significant improvement in her uterus size. Lining thickness was also optimal, but the vascularity was less than average. For frozen embryo transfer, estradiol valerate 2 mg twice daily was started from day 2 of her menses for 16 days, along with folic acid and vaginal sildenafil to improve endometrial vascularity. After 16 days, endometrial thickness was optimum, but vascularity was still less than average. Vaginal progesterone 400 mg twice daily was added to synchronize endometrium for 3 days, as day 3 embryos were to be transferred. Then embryos that were frozen 3 years back were thawed. The embryos were taken out from the cryocan, and then they were passed through sequential thawing solution in which there is non-permeable cryoprotectant that allows the embryo to expand gradually. Then they are checked for viability and allowed to culture in culture media for some time. All three day 3 embryos were transferred under ultrasound guidance. The same dose of estrogen and progesterone were continued for 14 days. Serum beta-HCG testing was done and it was positive. Hormonal support continued. Early pregnancy scan was done at 6 weeks, which showed a single live fetus corresponding to gestation. After 2 weeks, she came back to us with complaint of spotting per vaginum. Repeat scan was done, which showed missed abortion at 7 weeks. Dilatation and evacuation was done. Products were sent for karyotyping and the report was normal. Despite our best efforts, the patient unfortunately did not achieve a successful pregnancy outcome with her own oocytes, but she had a strong desire of becoming mother. There were certain concerns. The patient estrogen receptor tumor positive status, cumulative estrogen exposure with repeated HRT cycle, potential risk for recurrence or reactivation of dormant disease. Hence, we advised patient to avoid further estrogen-based protocol and defer pregnancy indefinitely. And she was counseled regarding alternate options of donor oocyte with surrogacy or adoption. The patient was adamant to take another attempt with donor oocyte with her own uterus. Strong personal, emotional and cultural beliefs motivated her decision. Informed written and audiovisual consent were obtained and then she was shifted to donor oocyte program. A 2-month rest period was advised after DNA for uterus recovery, psychological healing and hormonal stabilization. Meanwhile, patient was referred to oncology evaluation before starting further estrogen-based HRT. Oncology clearance obtained. After 2 months, uterine size and vascularity was re-evaluated. She was given one low-dose HRT cycle, and she responded well with this. The vascularity was also good this time, and this could be attributed to prior successful conception. Donor oocyte cycle. The donor was selected as per Indian ART Regulation 2021. She must be registered and provided through an ART bank. Her age should be between 23 and 35 years. She must be married with at least one living child. She should be...
For the knowledge of all the audience, Mahatma Gandhi Hospital has both ART bank also now and the center also, ART center, clinic as well as bank. So very few centers in the country will have both the things together. That is the advantage. You have the banking facilities also, and as well as you have the clinical facilities also.
She must be donating voluntarily without any financial compensation, can donate only once in her lifetime with a maximum of 7 oocytes can be retrieved. She must undergo psychological counseling, medical fitness evaluation, screening for infectious disease and inheritable disorders. Her identity is to be kept confidential and anonymous. 7 oocytes were retrieved from donor. Sperm was collected from recipient husband. 2 good quality day 5 blastocysts formed. Fresh embryo transfer was planned for this second attempt. Recipient menstrual cycle was synchronized with donor cycle. 2 grade A blastocysts were transferred. Successful conception achieved. Scan was done at 6 weeks that showed dichorionic diamniotic twin pregnancy. Patient was counseled about risk related to twin gestation with IVF, including preterm birth, fetal growth restriction, pregnancy-induced hypertension, difficult delivery. Couple was given the option of fetal reduction, but they refused, knowing slight risk of abortion with the procedure. Written consent was obtained. Nuchal translucency scan, nasal bone scan, along with dual marker was done at 12 weeks, and both were normal. Patient currently is 13 weeks pregnant, no vaginal bleeding, abdominal pain or hyperemesis. She is showing good compliance to medication and follow-up. This journey to motherhood is ongoing, miles to go, but each step forward is a victory. Here are certain concerns with her pregnancy. She is a high-risk case. There is risk of preterm delivery, placental insufficiency, fetal growth restriction. She is a potential case for anemia or nutritional deficiency, anticipated difficult cesarean delivery with history of laparotomy, and she requires close oncologic surveillance during and after pregnancy. Now I would like to call our respected HOD ma'am to discuss relevant literature and recent guidelines related to this topic.
So why this case? The fertility preservation is an emerging concept in comprehensive care of cancer patients to improve their quality of life. And this case emphasizes tailored approach, shared decision making and patient autonomy in a high risk emotionally complex case. And it also covered the broad spectrum of fertility management options in the cancer patients, including genetic counseling, PGT, and donor gametes. So far, we have counseled 68 patients for fertility preservation referred from our oncology department, and few patients from SMS and Bhagwan Mahavir Hospital. And 22 out of 38 males, they underwent semen freezing, and 9 out of 30 females, they underwent oocyte or embryo freezing for future use, and most of the cases belong to CA breast, CA ovary, lymphomas, leukemias, and germ cell tumors. So when we search the literature, most of the literature is concerned with the early stage fertility preservation and conception, where the live birth rate goes up to 65 to 96% with recurrence risk of 5 to 32%. But we get a few articles that resembles our case, like this from Kochi, Kerala in 2021. And this 29-year-old nulliparous woman having bilateral complex ovarian mass, they underwent laparotomy for bilateral cystectomy with infracolic omentectomy. Frozen section shows epithelial ovarian tumor, but they waited for the final histopath report, which comes out to be malignant struma ovari with highly differentiated follicular carcinoma stage 3. And considering the desire of patient, they went for the fertility preservation, and after that the staging laparotomy was planned, bilateral oophorectomy and total thyroidectomy and radioiodine ablation was done, and 1 year after post ablation embryo transfer was done, and she delivered a healthy baby through cesarean section. And there was a short period follow-up after the delivery, 1 year only. Another case of stage 3C disease, which was having unilateral malignant ovarian germ cell tumor. She underwent surgical removal of tumor and 6 cycles of B prism, but she conceived spontaneously 8 years after the completion of chemotherapy. So with preservation of one ovary, the spontaneous conception is also possible. So we have the latest ASCO guidelines 2025 on fertility preservation, that it is that says that it is intended for voluntary use by the clinician and should be used in conjunction with the independent professional judgment. Guidance may not be applicable to all patients' intervention, diseases or stages of disease, and it can be modified according to the patient's requirement. So the key recommendations for fertility preservation, it should be discussed early, referred early, and we should value the discussion, and it should be universal counseling offered to all the patients regardless of the age, cancer type, prognosis, family status, identity, beliefs or financial backgrounds. It addresses health equity and informed care. So different options are there for female, but most commonly the embryo and oocyte cryopreservation are used, where the pregnancy rates go, live birth rate goes up to 40%, 30 to 40%, and but it takes 2 to 3 weeks delay of definite treatment with a risk of progression of the disease, obviously. And fertility preservation options in males are most of the time sperm cryopreservation, but in case of azoospermic cases, we can retrieve the oocytes from the testes by surgical procedure. Sperms from the testes by the surgical, and 30 to 40% retrieval rate is there even in post chemo azoospermic patients. So the take home message is, when a cancer diagnosis is disclosed, the immediate focus of families is on eliminating the disease. The important discussion about the future fertility are often overlooked. A decision many regret later. So it is important for all the physicians, surgeons, oncosurgeons, oncologists, hematologists to address and refer the patient for fertility preservation counseling at the very first visit itself, not just before the chemotherapy, but at the initial visit, so that we can plan the cycle according to our requirements and to get the best outcome of that cycle. So early sensitization can make a lifelong difference. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the patient and her family for placing their trust in us, for their strength and resilience, and for allowing us to share their journey, to the hospital administration and the university leadership for providing the platform and infrastructure. And we are very thankful to the Department of Medical Oncology, Medical Surgery and Nuclear Medicine, and last but not the least, the Ethical Review Committee for giving their time and efforts to make this presentation presentable. Thank you.